On the morning of November 20th, 2018, firefighters in Monmouth County, New Jersey, were called to two house fires. The first fire was at a home in Ocean Township. The homeowner, a man named Paul Canero, was already outside when they arrived. His wife and adult daughters had made it out. He told investigators he had no idea how the fire started. 3 hours later, firefighters were called to a second address, a mansion in Colts Neck, just 7 miles away. Inside that burning mansion, they found 4 bodies. Keith Caneiro, shot 5 times in the head and back, found outside in the yard, still in his pajamas. Jennifer Caneiro, 45, shot in the head, stabbed in the torso, found on a staircase. Jesse Caneiro, 11 years old, found in the kitchen, stabbed multiple times. Sophia Caneiro, 8 years old, found on a landing, stabbed multiple times. The fire had been set in a basement storage closet. Jennifer and the children were left to die in it. Keith Caneiro was Paul Canero's younger brother. 3 days later, Paul Canero was arrested. To understand what happened in Colts Neck, you have to understand what Paul and Keith Canero were to each other. Keith Caneiro was 50 years old. He was the younger of the two brothers, described by friends and family as warm, dedicated, and deeply devoted to his wife and children. He and Jennifer had built a life in Colts Neck that, by every outward measure, was exactly what the American dream is supposed to look like. A mansion home at 15 Willowbrook Road, 2 kids in school, a life that looked, from the outside, like it was going exactly right. Paul Canero was 56 at the time of the murders. He was the older brother, and for years, the two had been not just family, but business partners. They co-owned 2 technology companies together in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Their professional lives were as intertwined as their personal ones. Paul's own defense attorney, Monica Mastalone, would later tell the jury that Keith was Paul's favorite person in the whole world. The prosecution had a different story to tell about what that relationship had become. By 2017, Paul Canero's household was hemorrhaging money. A financial crimes detective who testified at trial analyzed 9 bank accounts spanning 2016 through 2018. What he found was a portrait of financial desperation. Paul's household expenses had totaled more than $402,000 in 2017 alone. By 2018, they had dropped, but only because the money was running out. Paul had been secretly stealing from the business he shared with his brother. He was the trustee of an irrevocable trust account linked to a $3 million whole life insurance policy held by Keith. Over a 2-year period, prosecutors said, he drained roughly $78,000 from that trust, transferring the money to his personal accounts. No deposits were made into the trust in 2018. Keith found out. The day before the murders, November 19, 2018, Keith confronted Paul about the missing funds. That confrontation, according to prosecutors, was the final push that turned a financial crisis into a plan to kill. The last 2 phone calls between the brothers, recorded and played for the jury, took place that same day. At 1:29 in the morning on November 20th, 2018, surveillance cameras at Keith's home in Colts Neck captured Paul Canero walking into the garage. At 1:30 a.m., 1 minute later, the cameras stopped recording. The power had been cut. Keith Canero had received a text from Paul in the early hours of the morning about a power outage and a failed generator. Keith went outside, still in his pajamas, to check on it. He was shot 5 times, in the head and back, at point-blank range, according to the state police expert who analyzed his wounds. He was found in the yard of his own home, in the dark, in his pajamas. But inside, prosecutors say, Paul then went through the house. Jennifer Canero was found on a staircase, shot in the head and stabbed in the torso. Jesse Caneiro, 11, was found in the kitchen, stabbed multiple times. Sophia Caneiro, 8, was found on a landing of the stairs, stabbed multiple times. Autopsies found that smoke inhalation was a contributing factor in the children's deaths. Jennifer and the children had been left alive long enough to breathe in the smoke from the fire Paul allegedly set in the basement storage closet before leaving. They did not die quickly. After leaving the Colts Neck mansion, prosecutors say Paul drove the roughly 7 miles back to his own home in Ocean Township. At 5:01 in the morning, firefighters were called to that address. Paul Canero's own home was burning. His wife and adult daughters were inside. They made it out. Paul was already outside, waiting. He told investigators he had no idea how the fire started. 3 days after the murders, Paul Canero was arrested on an aggravated arson charge related to the fire at his own home. Within days, murder charges followed. He pleaded not guilty. He maintained his innocence. He would maintain it for 7 years, through investigations, indictments, delays, and finally, a trial in January 2026. But the evidence that prosecutors had built over those 7 years was extensive. The surveillance footage, at 1:29 a.m., Paul's car had been captured, leaving his Ocean Township home and driving toward Colts Neck. It returned in the early morning hours, before the fire at his own home was reported. The timestamps placed him at the scene. The clothing. In Paul's basement, investigators found clothing he had hidden. On those clothes, bloodstains. DNA testing matched that blood to his slain relatives. Specifically, his niece Sophia's blood was found on his jeans. The gun. Ballistic evidence matched a gun and bullets owned by Paul Canero to the wounds found on Keith's body. The gas can. Found in Paul's driveway. Physical evidence of the arson at his own home. The financial records. 9 bank accounts. $402,000 in household expenses in 2017. $78,000 drained from Keith's trust. A $3 million life insurance policy, of which Paul stood to receive $1.5 million upon Keith's death. And then there was the detail about the security cameras at the Colts Neck home. Paul had installed Wise security cameras throughout Keith's property. He told investigators he had turned the system off the day before the murders because it was slowing down the Wi-Fi. But when investigators examined the system, they found it was hardwired, not connected to wireless at all. The cameras could not have been slowing down the Wi-Fi. He had turned them off for a different reason. The last thing the cameras captured before they went dark at 1:30 a.m. was a silhouette outside the frosted garage door. Paul Canero's own daughters testified at trial, defending their father. The defense pointed the finger at the third Canero brother, Corey, who had also stood to receive $1.5 million from the same insurance policy, arguing that investigators had never properly examined him as a suspect. The jury heard 4 hours of deliberation and came back with guilty verdicts on all 15 counts. On May 19, 2026, 7.5 years after the murders, Paul Canero stood in a Monmouth County courtroom to be sentenced. He stood still, stone-faced, the same expression he had worn throughout the trial. Jennifer Canero's sister addressed the court. They were beautiful children, a beautiful family. They did everything together. They loved each other. For a crime rooted in greed and complete disregard for human life, there must be accountability, maximum accountability. Monmouth County Prosecutor Raymond Santiago spoke after sentencing. The sentence demonstrates that a person who is driven by greed and depression, jealousy and viciousness gets exactly what he deserves. Judge Mark Lemieux, before pronouncing sentence, looked at Paul Canero and said, "It's a flat-out killing of innocent people. Cold, deliberate malice." Then, his address will forever be the Department of Corrections. Paul Canero received 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. one for each person he killed: Keith, Jennifer, Jesse, Sophia. He also received 8 years each for the arson and theft charges. He is 59 years old. He will die in prison. He said nothing at sentencing. Jesse Caneiro was 11 years old. Sophia was 8. They were found in their own home in the middle of the night, in a fire their uncle had set after he had already killed their father in the yard. Their mother was on the staircase. None of them had done anything except exist in a family where one man decided that a $1.5 million insurance payout was worth more than 4 lives. If you love cases like this, the ones that took years to reach justice, the ones that don't get told the way they deserve, subscribe and drop a comment below telling me which case I should cover next. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next video.